What are you passionate about? Okay, everybody can pretty much answer that. These are the things that what do you do with that passion that is different than everyone else? Because that's going to be the seed to your business. And the third one is are you willing to wake up day after day and do this thing that you're passionate about, even if there's no fame and fortune immediately in it? And if you can answer those three questions, and the last one's yes, then you've got yourself a business and you'll be successful.
You are listening to 5 a.m. Podcast.
The 5 a.m. Podcast.
Good morning and welcome to the 5 a.m. Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Clausen. Now, for many of us, the phrase starving artist has been repeated so many times it feels like a law of nature, which it is not. Now, we have been told that you have to choose between the creative soul, your bank account, your career, the list goes on. But what if the problem wasn't creativity? What if the problem was that business is being taught in a language that makes our creative side of the brain shut down? Paul Pape is a TEDx speaker, author, and a creative strategist known as Santa for Nerds. For over 20 years, he's been the secret weapon for giants like Disney, Universal, Nickelodeon, building a thriving studio by ignoring traditional business advice and forging his own path. He is the creator of Gamify Business and the author of The Creative Player's Handbook to Business. He's here to show us how to turn a character creation into business planning and a quest into marketing strategies. Paul, welcome to the 5 a.m. Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Michael. I appreciate it.
Yes, I'm looking forward to this conversation. I was thinking about Nickelodeon. Of course, that was not here for me to watch when I was that age. Paul, you've worked with Disney and Universal. You started in theater design after being told that you'd never be cast as an actor. How did that rejection actually set the stage for your business success?
Believe it or not, it was a blessing in disguise. I love being on stage. I love talking to people. I'm really bad about memorization, which doesn't really help you when you're trying to do TEDx's, by the way. But what happened is the professor who taught acting said that because I just wasn't really good at the memorization, I was the worst scene partner to have. She said, we're probably not going to cast you in any shows. So drop the major. And I'm a stubborn guy. So I'm like, nah, that's okay. So I was working in the scene shop at the time and I was doing my lab hours there because it was just part of the requirement. And the dean of the department came down and he saw that I had some decent work ethic and he's like, hey, how would you like to learn everything? And I'm like, everything? What's that mean? He goes, everything, every aspect of theater. I'm like, I'm game. And really what he did is he showed me everything from janitorial to box office to directing and stage management to design. And it was really when I hit the design aspect of it that it really started to speak to me as a artist. And so I really leaned heavily into scenic design, scenic and properties. And I was really good at it and ended up going to grad school for it and won some international and national awards. And then I was actually in the last year of my graduate program. Actually, I just graduated. I was working with I was assisting a Broadway designer who had like 4 or 6 shows on Broadway at the time. And I was asking him, I said, John, his name was John Arnone. I said, John, what's it like being the apex, like being the top of it? Because as a scenic designer, Broadway's where you want to get. Yeah. And he was brutally honest with me. He goes, it sucks. It's not very fun. And I was like, oh, he goes, if you want to actually like tie down, like have roots, settle down anywhere, this is not the job. He says, you're going to be on the road 48 weeks out of the year. You're going to be constantly doing paperwork. You're paying for things that you're never going to see just to keep up with the job because it doesn't pay that well. And that was kind of an eye opener for me. And so from there, I took all the skills that I had gotten from the education that I had, and I decided to try and do something else with it. And what that did is I loved making gifts for people when I was a kid. So I thought, well, what if I started making things for people and charging money for it and see where that goes? And I'd love to say that I snapped my fingers and I was successful at it, but no, there's a long road to build that one up. But that's kind of the story of how I got to where I'm at.
Right. Wow. That is interesting. And yes, the people, ladies and gentlemen, the people that put on shows for us, whether it's music show or the arts and at a theater, hats off to them because they sacrifice a lot to entertain us and to design. And so hats off to those people. You've mentioned that academia felt like looking behind the curtain of The Wizard of Oz. What was the specific moment you realized you had to stop being a professor and start being a full-time entrepreneur?
I was in my 3rd year. I'd actually gone to grad school out and then lived in LA. I tried to do the movie thing for a while. And then my wife was not a big fan of California. So we actually moved back to Nebraska to be closer to her family. And she took a job right away. And I was still kind of floundering, trying to figure out what I wanted. I had a side business that I was doing okay, but I needed something more stable. And so my university that I went to undergrad for, the one that told me I would never be an actor, actually reached out and said, we just fired our technical director and scenic designer, and we need a professor to step in. Do you want to do it? So no interview, no nothing. I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? So I stepped in and I ended up being there for 3 years. And what happened in that third year is they said, you're now on tenure track. So to do this, you have to start doing more. And at that point, I was already putting in 70-hour weeks, and I really didn't have more to give. And what I recognized was that no matter how hard I tried, they still saw me as the 18-year-old instead of the almost 30-year-old who I was at that point with degrees and awards and all that. And so no matter how hard I tried, I would still be that struggling kid who shouldn't be acting or shouldn't be in this department. But what I realized was that also I was not loving the bureaucracy of education, of higher education. I thought I was going to go in and teach these people who were in a department because they knew what they wanted to do. They wanted to hone these skills and do something with it. And that's exactly what I wanted to do. But what I found more is no matter how good the class was, if I wasn't pushing 200-300 students through at a time, it wasn't registering on the university as being useful. And so it felt more of a struggle every day just to stay relevant in a department that just didn't seem to want me. And so in that last year, I actually stumbled into this whole work that I do. I had a student ask me if I could sculpt him some figures from the Nintendo Wii for him and his girlfriend for the holidays. And I was like, yeah, sure. And what happened is I made those and he submitted them to a blog, because this is back in early 2000s. So there wasn't YouTube, wasn't Facebook, wasn't all those things. And what happened is it went viral and people started contacting me and asking me if I could make theirs as well. And from there, I started making more on the side, doing that little side hustle gig than I was teaching. So I thought, hey, why don't I try and quit this? So I asked my wife for permission. She gave me 1 year. And then I actually had some really good things come out of that first couple of months. And she's like, I think you've got an idea here to run with it. And so that was 20 something years ago and still doing it.
Wow. It almost sounds like maybe you were being like John Keating, Robin Williams' character in Dead Poet Society, and trying to do something as a professor of students and getting slapped down by
Absolutely.
Mr. Nolan, I think. That was something like that. There you go. I love watching the movies, love talking about movies, and of course the silver screen. But that is really quite something that just from Goodwill Hunting, you made those figurines and it turned into $50,000. Looking back, that must have been more than just a lucky break, and certainly was a foundation. Can you talk a little bit more about taking that win and using it as a foundation to build more?
I think what I learned, here's the thing, and I recommend anybody who ever gets the chance, go out and do some theater, because theater is going to teach you some soft skills that are universal. And that's really what's helped me with my business. They also teach you this rule of yes, and it's an improv thing.
Right.
And basically that's been the crux of my business. Instead of saying I only do this. So when I started with the figures, people wanted all these me's, but then they started asking for other things. And it was never, well, I only do me's. It was, yes, and I'll figure out how to do it. And what happened is it was just constantly rolling with that. Now, what was funny about it is that I was constantly told you cannot run a business doing custom work. You have to have a product. You have to stick with that product. Customization is the death of business. And yet I ran a custom-based business for over 20 years where I didn't have a product. All I sold was my ability to make whatever you wanted, which is where the name Santa for Nerds came from. And so I took that idea of the me's and the custom figures, and I thought, well, what else can we make with this? And so everything that came out was like, well, I ended up doing me's as standalone figures, but then they turned into wedding cake toppers, but then those turned into ones from other nerddoms. So I was doing, Xboxes and World of Warcraft. And then eventually it started turning into ring boxes for proposals. So I was doing Harry Potter and Doctor Who and all of these random things. And just anybody would come to me and they'd be like, hey, can you make this? Yeah. And I just figure it out. And those are the skills that I can do that because of the skills that I learned doing theater. When you do a show, you have 6 weeks to learn something. In one show, you could be a master cake builder, as you mentioned earlier. And then the next week, you're having to make realistic, basically I did a show called Dead Monkey. I had to make a realistic looking spider monkey that we could be articulate and put on
Wow.
stage and whatever. I mean, it's just a weird skill set to have. And so it really helped with building this business.
Oh, it certainly is as the French would say, trompe l'oeil with their
Yeah.
painting of fooling the eye. You know, a flat wall that you see from far and it looks like these ornate pillars with cornices. And then you find out it's painted
Just
on.
paint. Yep.
And so did you find that as you were going through your career up to this point, you had kind of felt like there was a whole lot of trompe l'oeil going on around you and you wanted some reality?
Yeah, there's it's weird because the answer is yes. There's a lot of fake that's going on out there, and what I was trying to do is add some tangibility to it. My wife likes to say that I make memories tangible, and I love that line because it really does add some gravitas to to the work that I do. I make tchotchkes, but hey, we'll go with that. But yeah, there's a lot of people out there selling smoke, and I wanted to make sure that the road that I was walking down was one of tangibility and honesty. And so the way that I approached that was I never gate kept any of the information. If you wanted to know how something was done and you asked me, I would tell you. And I found that the more people, the more experts that I worked with. There's a great example of this on custom action figures. So there's a bunch of big name companies out there that make all the action figures that we have. A lot of the paints that they use in China are very toxic. They're not allowed in the United States, but we do a lot of prototyping here in the United States. And there's like 2 or 3 big name companies that would show their workshop on social media, and you'd look at them and they'd make sure to turn all the bottles of their paint backwards so you couldn't see what they were using to gatekeep the information.
Yes, right.
And it was so infuriating because here we are stuck with using like craft acrylics and stuff that you buy at like the hobby store. And so one day I was just scouring through them and I saw just 3 letters on one side of one bottle, and I was able to backwards figure out what that was. And to this day I shout it from the rooftops. And this is what we sell art paint, by the way, in case you're wondering.
Good.
It's a very thin but very opaque paint that you can use on it so that you don't get that really thick, chunky looking paint job on the figures, and it looks great.
Wow.
It's those kind of things that I noticed more and more in the industry. People didn't want to give up their secrets because if they did, they thought that they would lose the work. But what they didn't recognize or realize was that they were the art, not the things that they were making, not the things that they were hiding. It was the skill sets that they brought to the table that allowed them to do the things.
Right.
And so that's what I did for 20 years. I've been for 6 years on Twitch. I don't know if you're familiar with the platform, but it's like, it's gaming, but there's also like a 20% subset that's just artists. And so for 6 years, for 6 years, 6 to 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, I was doing my art job in front of 3 cameras, and I was basically showing them how to do the work. And I'd get a lot of people asking me questions like, how are you successful at this? Like, how do you figure out what to charge? Like, where do you find your clients? All of these questions. And I would literally just answer questions. And so it was all about being genuine and being helpful, and then not gatekeeping any of the information, because I knew that, people are hiring me because of my skill set. They're not going to, if somebody else wants to go out there, I don't care what tools they use, they're not going to be able to have my lived experiences to be where I'm at with my skills.
Yeah.
And so share that information. And from that actually is what kind of spawned Gamified Business, was the ability to teach creatives how to be successful business people instead of being the starving artist.
Yes, right. And a lot of people, they don't think of like our thumbprint or fingerprints. They're all different. Nobody's got 2 alike. And that certain zest for life or angle that we have to do something lets us actually create one-of-a-kind things that might be duplicated, but it'll never be an identical copy to what each of us has an eye and flair to do. Let's talk about the character creation phase of your story. Most people start with a business plan. You started with a character sheet.
Yep.
Why is that so distinctive, or maybe why is that distinction rather so vital for a creative mind?
Well, couple things here. One, creative thinkers are not linear thinkers. We I like to call them cloud thinkers. I heard somebody say lateral thinkers today, but we don't go in a straight line.
No.
Instead of A, B, C, D, we're A, Q, F, G, we're just all over the place.
That's right.
And so what I found was that with creatives trying to do business, they were being taught business things in a very linear way of thinking, and it bored them. It was too confusing. It was a lot of obstacles. So but I know as an artist myself is that the things that I make are not the things that I should be selling. It's me that I should be selling. And
Yeah, right.
the only way to know me is to really like sit down and figure it out, like write it all out. And so we start with the character sheet, which is a deep dive into your own personality. Like the first 3 questions that we ask are very simple. What are you passionate about? Okay, everybody can pretty much answer that. These are the things that I like. The
Mhm.
second question is, what do you do with that passion that is different than everyone else? Because that's going to be the seed to your business. And the third one is are you willing to wake up day after day and do this thing that you're passionate about, even if there's no fame and fortune immediately in it?
Yeah.
And if you can answer those 3 questions and the last one's yes, then you've got yourself a business and you'll be successful at it because you understand who you are. So we start with the character sheet. We start to figure out what your skills are, what you're good at, what you're not good at. One thing that I realized when I started doing these character sheets is that people were being more honest. They were being brutally honest with who they were. Whereas if I asked you, Michael, I said, what's your biggest flaw in your personality? You'd be like, well, I don't know if I necessarily want to say that. But if I say, you're going to make you, Michael, a character in this game that we're going to be playing,
Mhm.
but I need to know your strengths and weaknesses. You're like, oh, well, my character's weaknesses are this, and this.
Oh, yeah,
And
right.
you're like, yeah, because it's that separation of ego.
Mhm.
And so then what we found is that even though you are describing yourself, that separation, that one step away from ego allows you to be more open with yourself. And the reason that we want to know what you're not good at is because eventually, once you figure out who your character is, we want to go out and find other people to be in your party, to be your group. And the only way that we know how to do that is to know your weaknesses and your strengths so that when we find somebody who complements you, they have your weaknesses as their strengths and vice versa. And so we call that looking for group. And so I've got personality tests. It's kind of a little bit like a Myers-Briggs that we take, but
Okay.
we actually end up being things like these cards here. You can be like a ranger or an
Fun.
artificer.
Nice.
And what these do is they tell you a little bit about yourself. You take the quiz, you actually get an 11-page like deep dive into
Wow.
who your personality is in business. But on the back of it, it says your ideal partner is going to be, so if you're an artificer, your ideal partner is
Yeah.
going to be a wizard. And so that's what helps. And that's why character sheet is so important. Knowing who you are is going to help you sustain your business longer than just the objects that you make.
Much like your cards.
Mm.
It's all of those great video games that are out there of building your character and
Yeah.
being able to put your team together. And like you say, this wizard is going to work best with you. And I love that idea about putting those kinds of ideas to paper. And traditional businesses often, or traditional business education often feels like a foreign language to artists. Would you say the biggest lie, or what is the biggest lie that the business world tells creatives about how they should operate and the rules they have to follow?
I think the biggest lie that corporations tell artists is that you will be a starving artist. I think you
Yeah.
need to have the machine to sell your product, and they own the machine. And so it's either if you go at it on your own, you're going to be poor. It's a 200-year-old lie. So, I mean, it's been perpetuated for long enough. We all understand it. And we, like you mentioned in the intro, it's pretty much what we just think is what it is. But it was actually created during the Industrial Revolution because they realized that the creatives are the ones with the ideas, and businesses can make anything that they want, but they need the idea first. Well, the only way to get those people who have these great ideas to actually give them to you is to make it so that they can't live without you. And so they created this idea of these starving artists. Like Michelangelo was never a starving artist. He had backers. He worked for the state. He worked for he was a
Yeah.
hustler though. Like Mozart was obsessed with money. Like these people are creatives to the nth degree, yet we think of them as, oh, they're poor people who died. I mean, there's obviously, Van Gogh did die poor and destitute, but that's because he was living in the beginnings of those lies. So that's what I think the biggest one that the industrial complex is telling us is that without the machine to sell your work, you'll be poor and starve.
Yes. Right. And earlier today, I was reading about the Desert Fathers. And so there was this group of Orthodox or Catholic monks that went to live a hermit life in the desert. And what I was reading, they were addressing this idea of the vow of poverty. And it wasn't about them vowing to be poverty. It was about them actually being successful enough that they didn't have to rely on anyone else for their financial income, which I thought was a very good way to look at this idea of being the artist, of finding a a way or the pieces to the puzzle so that we can create our art, do what we want, not necessarily be a hermit in the desert. But I had mentioned to you before we started this about Bob, who was a mentor to me in my much earlier years of broadcasting. And he said, Michael, we got to look at everything like a game. Everything's a puzzle. And he would say, every game that we play is a puzzle, and there's a path to complete it. And so he would say, let's look at our production deadlines and the things we have to put together as we're playing a game and putting a puzzle together. And so the word play is an acronym that you use for your creative process, which is practice, learn, apply, and yield. Well, I wanted to ask you, we'll start at the end, I guess, because we can. I'm asking the questions here, ladies and gentlemen. Why is that final why, the yield or yielding? Why is that one the one that maybe most entrepreneurs ignore to their own detriment?
I think the answer to that one is got to be because we approach our destination, our art, our conclusion in such a strategic way, but then at the end of it, we've got to yield up what we have. Like the art that I create means something to me. The art that you create means something to you. But as soon as you're done with it and you open it up to the world, it's no longer yours. Your thoughts, your ideas, your statements behind it, you can post it all you want. But the reality is it has to have a visceral reaction from your audience. And then they're going to put into it their life, their lived experiences. And you have to yield over that idea. You have to sometimes let it go so that it can live on. And it may not live on exactly how you want it to, but that's okay. The fact that it has the ability to live on is the important aspect.
Now, there is the rule or the just a second, I got to re-ask that. You talk about the rule of 100, the idea that you don't need 10,000 followers in your tribe to thrive.
No.
How does that solo creator identify their true 100 without getting lost in all the social media noise?
It's a great question. And thank you for asking that one because it's something that's very dear to me because I was around before there was social media and then now I'm living through it. And what I've realized is there's a hustle for those, everything that we do has to get 1 million likes. And the problem is that it's such it's such a lie. It's such a blatant lie because honestly, likes don't equal dollars unless you're farming likes. But a lot of us are just trying to put out information or our work. The other thing is think back before social media, think back before the internet when we had small towns. We weren't this global economy that we are now with the internet. And think about a shop, just a mom and pop shop. They're selling whatever it is, widgets or whatever. And if 1 million people showed up one day, if 10,000 people showed up one day, and even if they didn't all buy something, but they went through and looked at everything, they touched everything, it would ruin that business. 100% ruin it. So what did they really truly need to be successful? 100 good customers every day, 100 good people coming through. Now, why is this important to know now in the world of social media? Well, because the reality is the 99.9% of your posts are going to get 100 likes or less, are going to get in front of the people, less than 100 people. Now, when I post and 150 people see my post, they give me a thumbs up or whatever, instead of being panicked that I'm not getting the reach that I need, I think of it as that's 50 more people than I need. Because those 100 people are seeing it and they're having a reaction to it and they become customers. And that's really what we need to retrain ourselves to understand is that in the reality of the world is we don't need millions of people to like our stuff. We're not trying to appeal to everyone either. We're not Coca-Cola. We're not McDonald's. We're not here to sell everybody a Big Mac. What we're trying to do is sell something very specific that's unique to us and that is from our lived experience. And what I found is that when you stop trying to appeal to everyone and you really try to hone in on your niche, they say the riches are in the niches. It's the truth. You start to really see who you are. And that's why the character sheet's important. If you know who you are, what your passion is, and you really ride that. There's an expression I use because of course we're talking Dungeons and Dragons terms here. So we can spend all of our time chasing the dragons of fame and fortune. But the problem is to get fast enough to catch them, we've got to strip away everything that we are. But if we ride the dragon of passion, fame and fortune will follow behind us. And that's the truth. Be passionate about what you're doing because there's going to be those days when you're not famous or rich. But you still got to get up and do the work.
That's right. Yes. The gas company comes knocking on the door. Hey up, sucker. And you're like, hold on a second. I got a
I'll
couple
pay you with
widgets to sell.
exposure. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. Can I pay my gas bill with exposure? Come on. And so going back to the movie that I was not connecting the actor with, the title was Captain Fantastic with Viggo Mortensen. I don't know if
Okay.
you remember that one, but
I never saw it. Saw the preview, I think.
yeah, no, that's good. It's a good thing I'm editing this. So so part and parcel. I love that we touched on Dungeons and Dragons and that aspect of writing. It's almost like you're writing the game as you're going.
Yeah.
And business, man, it throws you curveballs. Like whatever this business thing is, it should be in Cleveland. That's where the Baseball Hall of Fame is, right? I'm getting enough curveballs from this thing called business. It should be in the Hall of Fame. It's writing, and we actually can change the rules of this game we're playing as we go. But we probably need a team and maybe some helpers. And if you think of Dungeons and Dragons, hey man, this I don't know who came up with the idea, but I don't know if they were a craps player, but they're like, you know what, somebody should have like 12 or 15 numbers on one dice. That would be way better than just a 6-number dice. And sometimes you just got to call an audible. And can you talk about developing yourself, but also maybe a close group of friends who can help you weather those curveballs with some being able to call some audibles? I'm mixing sports metaphors here, but hey,
I get you.
we're writing this as we go.
Exactly. We're playing by the curveballs. That's what we're doing.
Right.
So yeah, when we do looking for group, one of the things that I like to do is I love a well-rounded group. Creatives have a tendency to, and just so we're clear on this, every artist is a creative. Not every creative is an artist. I know people who mow lawns who are super creative. Okay. It's like, so I say creatives instead, but what happens is creatives tend to create groups of like-minded people you'd want to go get a beer with. But the problem is when you're running a business, those people are exactly like you. So they are going to either be yes men or they're all going to want to be in charge. And it's a great way to ruin your business. So what you need to do is you need to surround yourself with people who are not necessarily exactly like you, but who support you in the areas that you need the support and vice versa. And so what I say is, like, a lot of times the leader who's their best companion is going to be somebody they would never get a beer with on social time, but they're going to be your best business partner because they understand how to navigate you as a leader. And so we do this thing called looking for group. What we do, instead of rolling dice for stats, instead of saying, today I have a 12 for strength, I wish that was the case because then I go lift weights more. Instead, what we do is we do a sliding scale of extremes. So we said, are you a really organized person or do you play it really fast and loose? Where do you fall on this scale? And so that's how we figure out who you are. And we ask a series of questions. And in the book, it's a lot of fill in the blanks, but on the app that we created, it's actually questionnaires that we go through. We put you in business situations. Like, if this is the scenario, which of these 8 different avenues is more likely what you would do? And from that, we kind of figure out who you are within business. And then we start looking for those people to help balance it out. And the whole equation is about balancing. It's like a checkbook. It's like doing your taxes. You want it to be as balanced as you can get it. Because when you're out there, then every challenge that you face, every curveball that's thrown at you, we like to call monster encounters. In my little world here, there's a person in your group who is specialized in taking care of that curveball, of that monster that you've encountered. And that's why you need to surround. Because if 5 warriors go running into a campaign and they have no healers, they're going to wipe. And that's the same thing in business. So you just have to, and that's how we take care of it. It's by finding people who are going to help support you in the best way possible.
Yes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking with Paul Pape, and we're talking about gamifying business. We do have that comment section. We love to hear your comments on the conversations that we're having. And don't be afraid to, put down your favorite game character or something themed along that side. So, Paul, as they're listening, how can our listeners get in touch with you and find out more about what you do?
Yeah, you can go over to gamifybusiness.com and you can learn all about this. And actually today, I mean, you're lucky, Michael, because I just started this today. I just started a 100-day challenge called #AskAnyways. We're always in this position where there's that one thing that we wish we could do, but we never want to ask for it. We don't want to be inconveniencing anybody. We don't think we can get it. We think the answer's already no. I want you to go out there and ask anyways. I personally am trying to get 1,000 asks in 100 days.
Wow.
Now, I'm a high achiever here. I'm an overachiever, one might say. But what I'm trying to do is get people to do it. All that information is over at Gamified Business as well. So just head over to gamifiedbusiness.com and participate. There are prizes to be won for challenging yourself. That's really what it's all about.
Nice. That's good. Now, something else that someone might say it's all about is pricing. And
Mm.
that's a massive hurdle for some creatives. And
Yeah.
you have a great suggestion. It's pricing your art like a magic item rather than a commodity. What does that look like in a real world invoice?
Okay, so here's the thing: and I always say a lot of creatives think this way,
Mhm.
is that they don't charge for labor because it's a love. They
Uh,
don't mind doing the work because they enjoy doing the work, so they don't charge for the labor. But if you lost the ability to use your hands, you'd have to hire somebody in to do it. Well, where's that money coming from? And the other thing is the things that you produce are unique to you. No one
Yeah.
else can do it. You talked about it earlier. You even said, you can get close, but it won't be the exact same thing. So
Yeah.
the things that creatives create are truly one of a kind. Even if we're
Mhm.
making 10, 15, 20 of them, they're all one of a kind. And so
Yeah.
if you can't go anywhere else to get it, why should you pay bottom dollar for that?
Mhm.
If I want a really, really nice, expensive one of 3 cars, they're not going to give it to me for $100.
That's
You
right.
know, there's
Yeah.
going to be 3 extra zeros, 4 extra zeros on top of that thing. And it's the same thing with the work that we create as creatives. We are wizards who create magical items. And so
Mhm.
and we do it in tiers as well. As to stick with the Dungeons and Dragons themes, there's
Yeah.
common, there's uncommon, there's rare, mythical, legendary,
Yeah.
all of these different tiers. When you're producing something, if you're making lots and lots and lots of them, that's a common object. You sell it for less. But there are the things that you make one of, well,
Mhm.
that's completely unique. That's a super rare, if not a legendary item, and the price should reflect that. And I
Yeah.
think once we start recognizing that we are the wizard who creates the magic items,
Yes.
then our pricing just kind of goes up with it. Here's a secret, and I love to lean in on the camera on this one. Every time I've raised my prices, I have
Mhm.
not lost work, I've gained work.
Yeah.
It's so weird. When you appreciate in value what you do, people also
Mhm.
reciprocate that.
It is really something. And to your point of the common items, so here's a little cell phone holder that I make out of pallet wood on my
Yeah.
router table. Sell these, I don't know, $15 at a craft fair. But then I've got my oh, I call this the gem bowl. It's an epoxy apple root burl bowl, and that one stays home because I don't want to sell it. That's
Right.
how
It's
precious
one of a
it is.
kind. You're never,
That's right.
I love a good burl because the grain that you get out of a burl
Yeah.
is just like an artist. No 2 cuts will ever be the same. And if
Yes.
you find that one that really speaks to you, yeah, hang
Oh,
on to
man.
that.
Totally. Totally. Well, I got to show you one other little one. And so for those of you listening and not watching on YouTube or Spotify, you won't see that I'm holding this little space needle that I
Oh,
made on
nice.
just a little waste piece of wood that actually looks like a mountain. And
It does. Yeah.
that anyway, really cool little piece. So we can be creative and we get to write the rules.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
that's the beauty of being creative and actually making something with your eyes, your brain, your eyes, and your hands. And we have a saying at 5 a.m. podcast. It's actually in our store. If you go to 5 a.m. podcast/store, 5ampodcast.com/store, it's think it, speak it, see it. It works in that order. Now, I do want to talk to you about when you worked on the Tonight Show.
Mhm.
And you were asked to build a dancing robot in just 2 days. So how does a creative professional maintain quality when the quest has such a tight deadline?
It's one of those things. Good, fast, cheap, pick 2, I think is going to be the answer
Yes,
right there.
right. Yeah.
And unfortunately with the Tonight Show, or fortunately with the Tonight Show, it's always got to be good. And then they want it to be fast. So it's not going to be cheap is really the answer to that. But what I did is I have, much like everyone else should when they're out there, they have their party to go to. I call
Yes,
them pocket
right.
people, the people I reach into. So that night I was furiously building the body of the robot, and I brought in a buddy of mine who also got generously paid to do this, and he wrote the code. I can do
Oh,
the coding,
neat.
but because I had to do other things and the time crunch was really there, we had to kind of divvy up the solution. So he worked on that, I worked on this, and we burned the midnight oil. And as a 50-year-old, there's less and less midnight
There's
oils
less
that we're
midnight
burning.
oil. That's true.
So when they happen, it's going to take me like 5 days to recover, but
Mhm.
you can make these things occur. And so that's really what it was. It was, you have to design fast. You have to be very confident in what you do and understand that mistakes will be made, but done is better than perfect.
Right.
And
Yes.
so we've got to be able to get it in the mail. We had
That's
a
good.
hard deadline. Got to get it in the mail. Okay. Does it do everything that we want? Can it be polished more? Absolutely. Will it do the job? Yes. Get it out there.
Done.
Cable management could have really had a lot more work done on that, but it was
Right.
ugly inside. It looked like an old 1990s, 1980s PC with all the
fun.
rat's nest of cables
Fun.
everywhere. But it worked. So
Yes. Well, my late father-in-law would tell me, only worry about what they can see, Michael. Nothing
There
else
you go.
matters. Paul, many people avoid boring parts of business like spreadsheets and taxes. Boy, don't I know. How do you reframe those, let's say, level 1 tasks so that they don't drain your creative energy and your eyes will not glaze over as you sit there pretending
Yeah,
to be asleep?
exactly. No, we all have them. There are tasks that we all hate doing. If you are not lucky enough to be able to job those out to people in your party and you actually have to do them, the best advice that I can give you is to do it in a sandwich. Frame both sides of the task that you don't want to do with things that you enjoy doing. Start your day off with the thing that fills you full of energy. Once you're all hyped up because you did that really cool thing, stop, tackle the task you hate to do, but then have one at the end of the day that you want to do as well, because then it gives you something to look forward to motivate you, because we're all carrot and stick people as much as we like.
That's right.
It to motivate you into finishing the thing you don't want to do so that you can go work on the thing that you do.
That's right. And just like going to the gym, 10 minutes is better than no minutes.
Correct.
So just keep at it. Keep at it. If you can do it for 5 seconds, you can do it for another 5 seconds. If
Yep.
that's, you got to put it down to that small amount of time. I can fill this cell in for sure. I can. You've also said that failure is where the real innovation happens. How do you distinguish between a game over, a failure that stomps you into the dust, and a respawn, a failure that actually might level you up shortly?
I'm a firm believer that every fail is a step, not a stop. Now, as to where that
good.
step leads you to,
Yeah.
who knows?
Right.
I've definitely been in the situations in which I was literally stomped into the ground. I mean, figuratively and literally in my life, I've been stomped into the ground. And what you have to recognize is that, and I don't want to use the term pull yourself up by the bootstraps, but you've really got to understand that it's not the end. It's a learning experience. The thing that we get hung up on as humans is we are naturally wired to dwell on failures, basically, because that's what allows us to survive. It's our survival instinct kicking in. That's why at 2 a.m., you're not sitting there staring at the ceiling thinking about that wonderful conversation you had. You think about that conversation you should have had but you didn't do it.
Yes, right.
Those arguments that you have in the shower with yourself, those types of things, because that's how we're wired as humans. And so what we have to do is we have to retrain the way that we approach problems. Don't look at them as failures, but look at them as learning opportunities to do it better or do it different moving forward. You cannot have a high without a low. Otherwise, we're just going to live in a midlife here. We don't want to do that. We want to actually enjoy the things a lot. But to have that, to understand that, you've got to fail a lot too. And so that's what I would recommend is rethink how you approach failure. I did a live show, one-man show called Paul Pape is Failing Creatively. And I loved it. I just went out there and I didn't know what I was going to do. I just went out there and just kind of ran with it, because if it was successful, great. But if it wasn't, so much to learn from. And the audience enjoys seeing that process.
Yeah.
And even in your own life, you have the same thing. Don't get hung up on the fail. It is a step.
Yeah.
It's not a stop.
And we all need to remember that it is indeed a step and not a stop or a stomp, as the case might be. Yes. Yeah. So perhaps I'm going to say yes, there are starving artists who would be listening to 5 a.m. podcast at 5 a.m. My hat's off to you, because that is no small feat. What is the first mindset shift they need to make before they start their workday?
Oh, that's a good question. Wow. I don't think anybody's phrased that one before like that. What is the first thing that they should think? The mind shifts first thing in the morning. You love doing this. Don't go into your job dreading your day. There's a 5/7 rule. I don't know if you've heard about this. The 5/7 rule to your work week. So a lot of people go to a real job, and I'll use it in air quotes, whatever, 5 days a week. And they say 3 days to the weekend, 2 days to the weekend. You're living your entire life. You're living 5 days of your life for 2 days on the weekend. And honestly, it's only one day because on Sunday you're dreading going back to work on Monday.
That's
So
right.
it's really just, it's a 6/7 rule. So
Yeah.
why, as a creative, when you wake up at 5 a.m. and you're listening to this and you need that motivation, recognize that you're doing something you love and you enjoy it. And you're up at 5 o'clock in the morning, starting your day. That's actually when I get up to start my work, is at 5 a.m. And so absolutely, you love what you do. Enjoy it. Enjoy this thing. Don't live for the 2 days on the weekend. Live 7 days out of 7 days.
Yeah. Yes. Wonderful. And in fact, there was a song written about that. Everybody's working for the weekend.
Correct.
And I remember hearing that as a much younger adult, thinking, wow, that's really connecting with my coworkers, but what a depressing way to live.
Right.
And
That's
I thought,
bleak.
it's so bleak. And I thought, I've got to enjoy every day. I have to seize the day. Hence, that's why we say it on 5 a.m. podcast. We seize the day, we seize the future. And I just, like yourself, I heard of older guys when I was in my early 20s of talking about the pit in their stomach when Walt Disney comes on the TV, because they know, oh man, I'm getting up, I'm going to the shop or the office, and I got to hang out with those people for 5 more days. And so just being able to enjoy every day and to know that it's not a life sentence, that we can actually enjoy what we do. And sometimes we got to change our perspective or our view, sometimes both.
Yeah.
And now, Paul, from my research, I discovered that you were once told you'd never make it as a solo entrepreneur, much like being told you'd never make it as an actor. Obviously, they were wrong. What do you say to the person who has well-meaning friends in their group, and that might be the accountant figure? I don't know if you have a card for one of those. They have this well-meaning friend and family member telling them the same thing: just give up, stick a fork in it, you're done.
Yeah.
Get a real job.
Believe it or not, okay, so I've been married for almost 25 years now. And
Nice.
not a year ago, my father-in-law told me I needed to get a real job. I earn over 6 figures. I'm a decent earner in my family. And I'm like, why do I need to get a real? He's go work at Home Depot. And I'm like, it's because people who are not creative do not understand
I get that.
what a creative job. Like they're upset because I sit at home. Later is what he said. You sit at home in your basement all day long. I'm like, no, I work in my basement. It's where my studio is at. I'm at home, but because I'm enjoying what I do, you should be punished for it, or it's not a legitimate job. But the reality is if you've got people like that in your life, you need to find other people who understand what you're doing, because unfortunately you can't you can, but what a lonely existence to shut out everybody who naysays you. That's just not the way that you're going to do this. I mean, I'd love to disconnect from my father-in-law, so I don't have to ever hear that again, but that's just not in the cards. So what you got to do is you got to surround yourself with other people who understand what you're doing, and you will all raise yourselves up. I'm surrounded by creative people. My family, my wife is creative. My kids are all creative. And I love being in this situation. So when we do go out there and we hear the naysayers that are out there, and they're all well-meaning, they're not doing it to be malicious. They just want the best for you, but they don't understand that, unfortunately, as a creative, you got to do this or you die inside. There's just a thing about it. And so when you go out there and deal with that, you got to build up the armor. And then usually it's your network of friends who provide that armor for you.
Right. Yeah. Otherwise, you do get the conversation of, listen, pal, if you're not miserable, you're not doing it right. Come on.
God, I hope to never live that life. That's all I'm saying.
Hopefully. Yes. Never. That's how I felt in my younger years, 30 years ago, starting out and hearing these guys respond to that song of Living for the Weekend and just thinking, oh man, if I'm not miserable, I'm not doing this job right. Or something like that. So if our listeners take only one quest, might be a side quest, from this episode today to start gamifying their life, what would it be?
Recognize that you are the hero in your own adventure. Okay. Do not be an NPC, non-playable character in your own life. Be the hero of your own adventure.
Yeah.
Run with that. But recognize everyone else is the hero of their adventure too. No one is the main character here. We're all on our own quest. But recognize that there's no do-overs. There's no level up to next character. There's no, respawn points, anything like that. You got one shot at this. And to waste it is a waste.
Yeah. And so if somebody wants to get started, they might be looking to video games or board games as their avenue to being creative, and they feel like they have to be committed to their 9 to 5 cubicle. They don't want to be, but they feel obligated to it because of the bills and the other things that are going on. How do they take that first small step to actually express their creativity into something that could last for their lifetime?
Again, follow your passion. Because like we said before, it's going to be a side hustle when you begin. Mine started as a side hustle. Everybody that I know who does creative for the rest of their life start as a side hustle, and then they start to build into it. And because we do have bills to pay, we have obligations, and that's just the way of life. So what you have to do is you have to really understand the passion behind it. If you don't love it in a weird kind of way, then you're not going to stick with it long enough to get past that hump, that hurdle of it becoming less side and more main quest.
Yeah.
And so that's what you've got to recognize. Understand the passion of it, which is why we ask those questions. What are you passionate about? Why do you want it? And here's the thing is your passions can change over time. Just understand that when you rewrite, like Gamified Business came very late in my career. It came after 20 years of doing Paul Pape designs, but I've got the passion for it. But I understand this thing isn't going to make the same money right away that Paul Pape designs did after 20 years of working in it. You know, there's going to be a balance in here. And so you have to recognize that and then follow your passion. And eventually what happens is if you're true to who you are, you find your people, your 100 people, which we already talked about, and then you keep that up. Eventually you're going to notice that the discrepancy gets less and less. And eventually that side hustle starts to outpace the 9 to 5er. And that's when you make the jump.
Yeah.
Unless you're crazy like me and you just make the jump anyway.
That's
Just
right.
hope for the best.
Yes. Well, and I can say for Susan and myself doing 5 a.m. podcast, we're fortunate that we have flexibility and we do have some supporters, and that puts a lot of wind in our sails. So to those of you that know creatives, if you're going to buy something, buy it from a creative friend instead of the big box store.
Yes.
That'll really make somebody's day, and it'll help bring some love and some joy and some freedom to your friend circle and supporting those creatives and shopping away from those big conglomerates. Ladies and gentlemen, there you go. I love capitalism, but it's better when it's within your neighborhood or your family.
And if I can tack on one small thing to that,
please,
is if you are buying from a friend who's a creative, don't haggle.
Oh, please, yes. For the love of
Please
God.
just pay the price. It may be sticker shock. Keep that surprise Pikachu face to yourself and then pay the bill, because they're not going to come to your work and ask you to work for deduction. Please don't do it to them.
Yeah. Yeah, pay the friend premium because you're probably going to have to buy breakfast for them one Saturday anyway. So just take that one Saturday off the calendar and just know that you did your good deed. So there you go. Paul, thank you for showing us that the starving artist can be the well-fed artist, and that it's a myth that businesses, they can actually be the greatest creative adventure in our lives. So thank you for being on the 5 a.m. podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Michael. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it was a lot of fun. Anytime we can talk about games. And I got to say, a shout out to my parents. I don't know if this will make it into the edit, but they made us play games. As much as I love turning that TV on, they'd be like, no, game time, boy, get over here. We sit at the table and play games in this family, boy. Oh.
But that's good because it teaches you things. It teaches you rules that you wouldn't get out in the real world.
That's right.
That's the great thing about it. And it's subtle. That's why we use gaming as a technique here, because we don't want to learn the complicated things of life. But if I put it as a game, you're like, oh, I can learn game rules. I play games all the time.
Totally. I could do that. And you know what? We learned to read a lot better because my parents would make us read the instructions out loud. So we were learning our public speaking. We were learning,
there you go.
All that good stuff, man. It's so much better than flipping the switch and just opening the eye gates and letting the light pour in. And
absolutely.
So much better. Well, ladies and gentlemen, for all those of you that are listening, we appreciate you being here. Share this with a friend if you don't mind. And if you're ready to stop looking at business as a chore and start looking at it as a game, you can actually win. Paul has a special gift for you. Head over to gamifybusiness.com/podcast. Paul is giving our 5 a.m. listeners free access to the 2 chapters from the book, The Creative Player's Handbook to Business. And that includes the foundation building character chapter, which I know I want to look at as well. So it includes a fillable worksheet that you can start defining your business identity today. There's no risk, just an actionable value to help you level up. And we appreciate that. As always, ladies and gentlemen, please seize your days. That's how we seize our futures. Enjoy those sunrises and sunsets and all those beautiful adventures in between. I'm Michael Clausen, and I will see you on the next 5 a.m. podcast. Thanks for watching the show. Just a reminder that you can get all of our resources, other episodes, and read our blog posts at 5ampodcast.com.